October 14th, 2025. This meeting will now come to order at 7 p.m. My name is Nate Andrews, Chair of the DRB. Please silence your phones and devices. For Zoom technical questions, please contact planning staff through Zoom chat. I'll begin by taking a roll call of DRB members in attendance this evening. Pete Kelly.
Present.
Scott Riley is absent. Brian Curtis.
Present.
Matt Fraser.
Present.
And the chair is present. We do have a quorum. The meeting will continue. The following items are on the agenda for tonight's public hearing. DP 26-04, discretionary permit request for an average setback exemption at 2707 Mountain View Road in the ARZD. DP 26-03, discretionary permit request for a boundary line adjustment and outdoor storage at 59 Avenue C in the Industrial Zoning District West. DP 2602, this is a pre-app request for a 5-unit development at 7997 Williston Rd in the Village Zoning District. And finally, DP 25-10, a discretionary permit request for a materials recycling facility at 1411 Redmond Rd in the Industrial Zoning District East. The Development Review Board follows rules of procedure and conducts quasi-judicial proceedings, aka public hearings like court, pursuant to the Williston Unified Development Bylaw, WDB, Chapter 6 and Appendix A. The powers of the DRB are established in and limited by this bylaw, as well as state statute, and expounded upon in staff reports for each public hearing application. As volunteer public officials, we are held to the standards of the Williston Volunteer Policy and the Williston Conflict of Interest Ordinance. For any public hearing item tonight, does any member wish to be excused on account of a public conflict of interest?
No.
Okay. Does any member wish to report an ex parte contact? Ex parte contact means communicating with or receiving from any person in regards to an application on tonight's agenda.
No.
Okay. In that case, we will move on to the first order of business, which is the public forum. Does anyone in attendance, either in person or on Zoom, have a question or comment for the board that is not related to an agenda item tonight?
No chats or raised hands on Zoom. We do have 3 public attendees on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. In that case, we will move on with the first item on the agenda. The hearing for DP 26-04 at 2707 Mountain View Road is opened at 7:05 p.m. Will the applicants please approach the table?
Gentlemen, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Sure, Brian Meisenzahl, 2707 Mountain View Road, Williston,
Thank you.
Vermont.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Staff goes next.
Thanks, Nate. This is a request for an average setback exemption. The request needs to be approved by discretionary permit of the Development Review Board. The property is developed with a single unit dwelling and an accessory garage. It's located in the agricultural rural residential zoning district. This application was not subject to design review or conservation commission review. Staff's recommendation is to take testimony and close the hearing, deliberate tonight, and approve the application with findings, conclusions, and conditions as drafted. The dwelling on the property was constructed circa 1850. In August, the applicant submitted an administrative permit for a residential addition, where it was determined that to meet their ideal location for the addition, it would need to be within that typical 50-foot front yard setback. Conservation Commission and the Historic Design Advisory Committee did not require comment on this application. The Public Works and Fire Department did not have comments, and the Police Department did not respond to the request for comments. One comment letter was received at the time of mail out. No further comment letters or emails were received to date. What follows is a summary of the ARZD zoning regulations. So typically there's a 50-foot front yard setback to Mountain View Road. The DRB may allow an average setback with the request of a discretionary permit. Staff prepared a average setback calculation. The DRB has precedent for properties within that 300-foot radius where the development, it's either a vacant parcel or the development is much farther away than that minimum setback, to use that minimum setback. So for example, there's a parcel where the structure is 500 feet away, the setback used 50 feet, 100 feet away, use 50 feet, and then the third parcel, the structure is 145 feet away. Recent precedent for this calculation includes DP 2417 Allaire on Hurricane Lane and St. George Road, and the other application was DP 2006 MD Motors at the Industrial Ave Williston Road intersection. So long story short, that calculation brings an average setback to 40.17 feet. So staff recommends approval with findings, conclusions, and conditions as drafted. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Brian, if you have anything specific to add, or have you had any conversations with neighbors that have either expressed support or concern, anything?
No, good question. I mean, my neighbor to the left from the road, he actually texted me earlier and said he supports it completely, so I believe he's on the Zoom link. So otherwise,
okay.
You know, I think there's total support and we're happy to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
DRB, any questions, concerns for staff or for the applicant?
None.
Any, Emily, anyone on Zoom or in the public, any questions?
Christine Doherty is our Public Works Assistant Director. She has her hand raised.
Okay. Christine?
Emily, it looks like the hearing is muted.
Oh. Town Meeting TV.
Yes.
The Zoom meeting is muted. I think you need to join as a panelist in order for folks
can you
online.
invite me as a panelist? Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, that should be a simple answer then to that question.
Thank you, Christine.
All right, if there are no other questions or comments from the public,
The public attendees, I believe, are on the Zoom for a later agenda item.
okay. Then we will close this hearing and move on to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
This hearing is closed at 7:10. Okay. Next item on the agenda is DP 26-03, discretionary permit request for a boundary line adjustment and outdoor storage at 59 Avenue C in the Industrial Zoning District West. Would the applicants please come forward? And we are opening this hearing at 7:10. Could you please state your names and address for the record?
I'm Michael Koch, Civil Engineering Associates.
Cooper Harvey, Patterson Fuels, C3H8 Holdings.
Thank you. Staff goes next.
Thank you, Nate. This is a request for a discretionary permit for a 3,304 square foot boundary line adjustment and establishment of outdoor storage. The property address is 59 Avenue C, located in the Industrial Zoning District West. This property shares a permit record as well as deed ownership with the abutting property, 58 Avenue B. The property is 1.51 acres. The current use is industrial, and there's no proposed change of use. And hang on, we have a member of the public with a raised hand. Is there any issue with the audio or visual for Zoom attendees?
I still need the panelist invite if that's possible.
Okay. I've been pushing it a couple times, so.
We're just trying to hear the meeting and it looks like it's still muted.
Okay.
Should be all set now.
All right, thank you. If there's any other issues, please don't hesitate to message or raise hand on Zoom. Okay, so this is a request for a discretionary permit at 59 Avenue C, located in the Industrial Zoning District West. The property is 1.51 acres. This property was not subject to design review or Conservation Commission review. Staff's recommendation tonight is to take testimony and close the hearing, deliberate and approve the application with findings, conclusions, and conditions as drafted. This is the first time the DRB is reviewing the request. There is a discretionary permit in 2008 for change of use and parking at the adjoining property, 58 Avenue B. And the building's construction was around 1970. Public Works comments are included in the conditions of approval. The fire department comments were excluded because they do not correlate to a standard of the duly adopted bylaw. No comment letters were received at the time of mail-out nor up until this evening. Project elements in terms of the Industrial Zoning District West. The previous tenant was Land Air Express, a warehouse and transportation use. The applicant proposes to demise the building into 3 tenant spaces. Those uses must be disclosed at administrative permit, and they must comply with the allowed uses listed in Table 31A. Dimensional setbacks. The front yard setback to Avenue C is 35 feet. The parking lot, approximately 13 and a half spaces, are within that 35-foot setback, and they are existing non-conforming. The side and rear setbacks are controlled by landscape buffers as discussed below. Outdoor sales and storage complies as proposed. So in addition to that boundary line adjustment, one of the primary reasons this has to come before the Development Review Board is only the DRB can improve outdoor storage on a site plan. Those areas are located to the side and rear yard, and it is screened with a fence in compliance with the screening standards. Vested rights, non-conforming lots, uses, and structures. So this site was likely developed around 1970 and has a sparse permit record. Most of the older record is in regards to the adjacent building at 58 Avenue B. Parking and outdoor storage has presumably existed on the site and in the setback since the lot was developed. Per Chapter 2.8, the DRB's power to correct nonconformities must be proportional to the proposed change. In this case, only the boundary adjustment and the establishment of outdoor storage necessitates that discretionary permit application. Therefore, the recommendation is to allow the rank of 8 parking spaces that are shown within the 9-foot setback to the northern property boundary to remain. And there's other nonconformities on the sites that can remain, such as overhead power lines, the established parking lot within the front yard setback, 2 points of access onto a local road, and insufficient landscape buffers due to pre-existing site conditions whereby pavement is up to the property line and there's shared pavement to that western property line. The boundary line adjustment complies as proposed. There's not a minimum lot size in this zoning district. No change to access is proposed. Off-street parking and loading. The applicant proposes 28 parking spaces where typically 2 ADA spaces would be required. They are proposing 1, which may be allowable per WDB 14323, and that would need to be confirmed at final plans. Essentially, federal ADA parking levels sometimes can be lower than what our bylaw requires, so they would need to provide that documentation at final plans. Bicycle parking. They're proposing 1 inverted U-rack, which would be 2 spaces. Typically, 4 bicycle parking spaces are required. However, the DRB can allow fewer where it's unlikely for bicycle use to be proposed. This is an industrial zoning district with industrial uses, so staff has drafted those findings to allow 2 spaces. Ended trip facilities. An end-of-trip facility is a shower and a locker room. One could be provided that serves all 3 tenants, or if it's more feasible for each tenant's space to have their own, that would be required. The DRB may only waive the end-of-trip facility if the cost of constructing the EOT exceeds the 5% total project cost, and that would be the project cost of not only what the DRB is reviewing night to night in terms of the outdoor storage, but also the administrative work, administrative permit work to demise the spaces and do interior tenant work. On-site infrastructure complies. It's served by on-site wastewater and municipal water and overhead utilities. Maintenance complies. The site plan shows snow storage and solid waste enclosures. Landscaping. So compliance is anticipated. The southern buffer is supplemented with additional plantings where space allows and does not conflict with adjacent water and septic utilities. The northern buffer complies with existing nonconformities of parking and pavement within that setback. They do identify that 9-foot setback on the site plan. If there were ever to be a major redevelopment of this site, basically a scrape and rebuild, then those that pavement and parking within those setbacks might have to be removed and brought into compliance. But for now, what they're doing is utilizing that existing space within the setback that, by my records, indicates has been there since the site was developed in the 70s.
Emily, is it possible to bring up the site plan right now? Sorry, I know you're running the ship solo right now, but.
All good, I can do that. It probably makes a lot more sense to look at the site plan than listen to me ramble on. So let's pull that up.
And could you just point out where the boundary line adjustment is for us?
Yep. So north in this image is about the top left corner. And let me get my annotate tool on. So the boundary line adjustment is on the left-hand side. This building with the X is the neighboring property, 58 Avenue B. I'm going to choose a different color that shows up a little better. The northern property line is where the site plan shows a 9-foot side yard setback, but the vast majority of it is paved. And that's where they're showing a rank of 8 parking spaces and snow storage. The permit record and aerial photo shows this area being used as storage. The right-hand side is the front yard setback to Avenue C. That's the 35-foot buffer where the existing parking and access can remain. And lastly, the southern buffer, they're showing that 9-foot setback, and they're supplementing with plantings in that southwestern corner where the plantings will be adjacent to the proposed outdoor storage area.
Is there parking in the southeastern corner or no?
There is, it's parking of the outdoor storage, so the trucks and utility service vehicles associated with the propane fuel business. So it's parking spaces, but it's not employee or customer parking spaces, it's business vehicles.
So that southern border is where the 9-foot buffer is that they're slightly within, is that correct?
It's the northern one.
Okay. Now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Got it.
All
Thank you.
good. Let me clear my.
Sorry to hold you up, Emily. That
All
does make
good.
more sense now.
All good. So next, after landscaping is street trees. Compliance is anticipated. Final plan shall include street trees spaced 40 feet apart along Avenue C. And due to overhead power lines, smaller species are permitted. Signs are approved administratively. Outdoor lighting compliance is anticipated. They provided a lighting plan. However, a couple details and specifications are required to ensure compliance. And what follows are findings of fact, conclusions of law, and conditions of approval. I've bolded the conditions about the additional parking information that is required at final plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Could you please bring the site plan back up in case the applicant wants to refer to it? And Michael and Cooper, maybe you could walk us through like the outdoor storage area and the fencing and anything else you'd like to add to Emily's report.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So we're looking at sheet C 2.1, which shows the existing building and has a floor plan of some of the proposed interior improvements, just for reference. And the proposed outdoor storage space is located in that hatched area to the left of the building, looking at the screen, or to the west. And we developed that with Patterson Fuels and coordinated to be able to park all of their different fuel trucks, delivery trucks, service vehicles, et cetera, in an area that would be screened with some proposed landscaping along that border with the, I believe the adjoiner's the Cocoa gas facility. That the intent was to screen that from motorists along Industrial Avenue. I will note that on this plan, we did include a fence around the outdoor storage area. The intent of that was not so much screening, but rather more of a placeholder. The applicant seeks approval for that, but wanted to basically have that as an option to construct it in the future without having to go back before the DRB for additional site plan approval. And I'll also add that we are proposing a separate screening fence where the outdoor solid waste facilities are, just to the north of the outdoor storage area. So for motorists driving along Avenue C, most all of this outdoor storage area will be screened by the existing building. And to the south of the building, there's a row of cedars that is just adjacent to the building where the grass is kind of shown. I don't know if Emily can kind of draw a circle around that. It's a bit to the right. Nope, sorry. It's in between the building and the gas station. Yes, sorry.
That one.
Those. So those are some very mature cedars that will also shield that area from public view. And we're just really excited to breathe some new life into this long-term vacant facility and bring a Patterson Fuels to Williston. Cooper, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you both. DRB, any questions or comments? Nope. Okay. Then we will, sorry, is there any public comment or final comments from the applicant?
Yes, sorry. There's one of the proposed conditions mentions a sewer allocation, and I would like to ask that that be removed as this has existing on-site wastewater system. So a sewer allocation would be not applicable.
That condition and probably several others are boilerplate conditions, so if it sounds like it's not applicable, it probably will be at final plans.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Any other public comment?
A reminder to folks on Zoom to use the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to speak.
All right, if that's it, then we will close this hearing at 7:24 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to opening DP 26-02, the pre-app request for a 5-unit development at 7997 Williston Road in the Village Zoning District. Would the applicants please come forward? This hearing will open at 7:25. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Matthew Parisi. Address is 7997 Williston Road, Williston, Vermont.
Thank you, Matthew.
And the applicant's engineer, Jeff Oleski, is online. Jeff, I'm promoting you to panelist.
All right, staff goes next when you're ready, Emily.
Thank you, Nate. This is a request for pre-application review of a 5-unit development located at 7997 Williston Road in the Village Zoning District. The 5 dwellings will be constructed in 3 phases. The first phase is to construct 2 new dwellings, referred in the staff report as carriage homes, at the rear of the lot. They will be 2 small single-family homes. The second phase would be converting the existing garage into 1 dwelling unit. And the final phase will be converting what I refer to as the Lampman House, which is that existing historic structure, into 2 dwellings. The site is currently developed with the existing primary structure, the Lampman House, which today contains a commercial office, a real estate office, and 1 dwelling unit. The site also has the accessory garage. This subject parcel is referred to as Lot 1 in this report as it pertains to access and utility easements with the abutting property known as Lot 2. And it's the duplex at 7999 and 8001 Williston Road, located to the rear to the north of this parcel. The parcel is a ½ acre in size. It's mixed use. It has access onto a state road, Williston Road. It was subject to design review and not subject to Conservation Commission review. Staff's recommendation tonight is to take testimony and close the hearing, deliberate, and approve a set of recommendations. Staff wants to note that pre-application is not an outright approval or denial of an application. It's a list of recommendations and authoring the application to move forward to different permitting steps ahead that I'll get into further in the staff report. The DRB should carefully consider the recommendations about parking, setbacks, and required private open area. The DRB may modify these recommendations. Project history. This property, the Lampman House dwelling, was constructed circa 1849. In August 2016, the DRB approved DP 1506, which is a 2-lot subdivision creating this ½ acre parcel and separating it from the duplex parcel Lot 2. In January 2020, there was a discretionary permit to convert the house to the mixed-use building with the dwelling and the real estate office. And as part of that application, expanding the parking area and add a freestanding sign. In July of 2020, there was a certificate of occupancy, then known as a certificate of compliance, to occupy the site with a 2,000 square foot office and a 1,100 square foot 1-bedroom dwelling. The Historic and Design Advisory Committee reviewed this application on October 7th. Their recommendations are included. The Public Works and Fire Departments commented on this application. The Public Works Department comments are included. The Fire Department comments are excluded because they do not correlate to a standard of the duly adopted bylaw. Their one comment about the driveway width is met by the recommendations and the standards of the bylaw. One comment letter was received at the time of mail out. 2 additional letters were received today, and they passed those out to the DRB prior to this meeting. I do want to note to the board that in addition to those 2 comment letters, there is a site plan from the applicant. It's the same site plan, it just turns the tree layer off, so you can better understand the parking and setback standards. Phasing and sequencing. So this is just some clarity on those project phases. Pre-application is concept level, and this pre-app review covers all phases. The subsequent discretionary permit could cover 1 or more phases. And there's many standards in our bylaw about design and historic preservation. So, for example, if the first discretionary permit is for the 2 carriage homes only, and no changes are proposed to the primary structure or garage, then that discretionary permit does not need to provide architectural modification or materials information. So there could be some information about those structures that would need to be provided in the future if and when those structures are modified. Village zoning district, the dimensional standards are excerpted here. Compliance is anticipated from Route 2. Side and rear setbacks, so residential properties and all structures. The existing garage is non-conforming because it is 4 to 5 feet from the western property line and within the 10-foot side setback. The 2 carriage homes are anticipated to comply because they are 11 to 12 feet from the property line and comply with the 10-foot setback. In Table 41B, there is a specific setback for parking lots that serve a non-residential use and/or 5 or more dwellings. That setback is 15 feet, and the proposed rank of parking is approximately 6 feet to that side property line. We'll discuss this further in Section 14 below. Parking and loading and setbacks. The DRB can provide an exception. However, this property is not eligible because the approved site plan depicts parking setback 10 feet to the side property line, where today the setback is 15 feet. And this provision is only to allow existing parking areas to remain where there's no reasonable alternative, even in the case of partial redevelopment. Table 41C, building height, compliance anticipated and would be shown at later permitting phases. Similarly with building mass for the existing Lampman House and the proposed new structures, the telescoping building footprint, and the maximum footprint for a detached rear lot structure. All of those building standards comply with the existing structure and anticipated for the new structure. 41.7 standards for non-residential uses. This is applicable if any changes are made to the commercial real estate office. At this time, there's no changes proposed. 41.8 standards for new structures and additions. These apply to the 2 new carriage homes. The applicant is unsure if the garage to dwelling conversion will include modifying the roof line or adding a second story. The Historic and Design Advisory Committee reviewed these standards at their meeting on October 7th, and their recommendations are primarily about the information that must be presented in that future discretionary permit or discretionary permits if there's multiple, including architectural elevations and renderings, material specifications, and material samples. Telescoping building pattern compliance is anticipated. There's one special recommendation here that the 2 carriage homes have staggered footprints. And then for the remaining standards of 41.8, they either are not proposed, like street-facing additions, cottage courts, and all those standards about windows and doors, roof designs, material transitions, and massing and scale will be required to be provided at that future phase, and those standards met. 41.9, general site and parking lot design, required private open area. The discretionary permit must demonstrate that 15% of the half-acre parcel is private or semi-private outdoor space, open to the sky for the use and enjoyment of residential occupants. It cannot include land in the setbacks, nor can it extend closer to Williston Rd than the front facade of the Lampman House. Though not explicitly stated in this standard, land area that is dedicated to parking, driveways, and stormwater areas cannot count as, quote, use and enjoyment to the occupants. Essentially, this needs to be a lawn or a dedicated patio hardscape to count as private open area. I'll pause there if we have any questions on 41, chapter 41 there.
Are there any questions from the DRB at this point?
No.
All right. 41.12, screening and landscape buffers. We'll also jump to chapter 23 in a moment as well. So the applicant proposes a mix of single and 2 household dwellings plus a low-intensity office use at various phases. And the abutting properties are single and 2 household dwellings of the same intensity. I quote the intent standard of this section in the bylaw, and I emphasize the last sentence. It is not the intent of this standard to protect existing or proposed residential occupancies from visual nuisances of other residential uses of similar intensity. Of particular note is front yard landscaping on Williston Rd. Basically, the front yard beds will need additional plantings meeting a minimum square footage area, and that would be shown at discretionary permit. Parking lot screening to abutting properties. So this standard applies where there's a rank of 4 or more spaces, and they must have a fence around the perimeter to prevent headlights. That is shown on the plan. And it must be screened on the exterior side with plantings that consume 50% of the length of the fence. The DRB may permit an exception to the fence or planting requirement where one or more findings is made. Planning staff recommends that the landscaping be part of the stormwater treatment per WDB Chapter 29, i.e. using plants that are compatible with the swale, being water-tolerant plants. Of the 6 findings listed in the chapter, only one is applicable, that the nearest residential occupancy is more than 100 feet away from the parking lot. So the 2 dwellings on Lambert Lane, 33 Lambert Lane and 41 Lambert Lane, their rear facades are more than 100 feet from the property line, and then even a couple more feet to where this fence and where the parking lot is going to be. DP 2019 final plan, so this was the discretionary permit to convert the dwelling to a commercial office use. As part of that approval, there was a fence and landscaping requirement. I do note that the bylaw standards today require that fence and landscape to screen ranks of 4 or more spaces, not for headlights associated with vehicles entering or exiting the driveway. So that fence and plantings is primarily for where the driveway loops into Lot 1. The fence and landscaping was required as part of DP 2019. The existing conditions plan submitted with this pre-application depicts the fence but not the landscaping, and we have testimony from an abutting property owner that that landscaping has died. I also note that landscaping and portion of the fence are outside of Lot 1's 25-foot access easement. So Lot 1, this subject property, only has rights to 25 feet width of that flag lot. I'm not an attorney. I don't know what it means if something from that prior approval extends over land outside of that easement area. But at the end of the day, the bylaw standards for screening are related to the rank of parking spaces, not the driveway itself. Parking lot buffering to adjoining ways is not applicable. These parking areas are minimally visible as they are to the rear of the adjoining road, to the rear of the structures and minimally visible to the adjoining road. There are standards for outdoor storage, dining, and work areas associated with the non-residential use. The commercial office is not approved for outdoor storage or dining. An outdoor work area, i.e. a picnic table to do computer work, is located behind the building, and it is between the rear facade and rank of 3 parking spaces, and it's screened from the abutting properties to the west by the rear addition and the garage, and more than 100 feet from the abutting properties to the east. Some other standards are not applicable, and then that screening fence shall be 6 feet tall, opaque, and made of wood or non-reflective, non-shiny material. That would be confirmed at discretionary permit. In 4112, there's also standards for solid waste containers, and the threshold is 4 or more residential totes, so your typical 95-gallon tote. If it's 4 or fewer, it just needs to be stored to the side or rear where minimally visible from Williston Rd. Larger or more than 4, and it needs to be enclosed and screened. I'll pause there. Are there any questions about 4112 landscaping?
Nope.
Okay. 4113 mechanical equipment, compliance is anticipated. The discretionary permit must demonstrate that the new dwellings are served by underground utilities, and that new equipment is screened where applicable. Rooftop mechanical is not anticipated for the residential dwellings. And any new mechanical equipment along the east and west facades of the Lampman House and the east facade of the proposed eastern carriage home. I'm going to pull up a site plan so we're on the same page. So the carriage home on the right-hand side, which is its eastern facade, if there's any mechanical along that facade, it might need some screening because that facade might be visible from Williston Rd.
Emily, can we go back to that for a second? And maybe we're even going back a little bit here, but just for clarity, when we refer to lot 1 throughout this, we're referring to what you see there, and lot 2 is the greater area that encompasses that. Does the applicant also own lot 2, or is that separate?
No, lot 2 is separate. I used the lot 1 and lot 2 because it's faster than saying the street address numbers.
Okay. Thank
But
you.
the applicant only owns lot 1. Enforcement and guarantees. The DP shall include the necessary documents to demonstrate that required private improvements will be maintained, such as bicycle parking, landscaping, stormwater, pump station, etc. So earlier I mentioned that pre-application is an authorization to move forward. The applicant proposes 4 new dwellings for a total of 5 dwellings. So they may be in the growth management realm. So their next steps would be either to move forward to discretionary permit with a project that meets the inclusionary zoning requirements. Inclusionary zoning for this project would mean 1 unit perpetually affordable at 100% the area median income. Or after pre-application, they could participate in growth management review, whereby all units would be market rate and they would need to score a minimum of 40 points. The staff recommendation is that they move forward to growth management. A project can be going through various permit pathways. The fork in the road really comes when they file final plans for discretionary permit. So I recommend moving forward to growth management to keep all options open, but they could end up deciding to file a discretionary permit for inclusionary zoning. Chapter 12, subdivision and final plans. The discretionary permit shall include a draft corrective plat, and in fact, this plat could be recorded at any time because it only clarifies existing conditions. So the recorded plat does not accurately depict the sewer force main. The sewer force main for lot 2 runs through the middle of lot 1, between where the 2 carriage homes are going to be. Access. The property is accessed via a 25-foot wide access easement over the abutting property lot 2, which is the duplex at 7999 and 8001 Williston Road. It has a curb cut onto a state highway, Route 2. So at discretionary permit, a letter of intent from Agency of Transportation must be submitted. And the driveway must also comply with the specifications of Chapter 13. For the driveway serving more than 1 to 5 dwellings, it must be 12 to 16 feet in width, with 4 feet clear on either side. And for the portion of the driveway that serves more than 5, it needs to be 14 to 16 feet in width and paved, with 4 feet clear on either side. This may require the removal of existing trees. And when that driveway gets upgraded will depend on when that unit count is triggered in the permit application process, from 1 to 5 units, and then the threshold of more than 5 units. Off-street parking and loading. So the off-street parking requirements, the applicant proposes a total of 9 spaces, 7 surface parking lot spaces, including 1 ADA space, and 2 garage spaces, 1 per carriage home. The DRB and applicant should discuss if the number of off-street parking spaces is sufficient for any of the 3 phases. At discretionary permit, a shared parking analysis is required. What follows is a summary of what those 3 phases are. Table 14A establishes the maximum number of parking spaces, and at least 75% of those are required. The maximum can be reduced below 75% if the following criteria are met. There's also a special requirement in the village that the DRB may allow or require the minimum number of spaces necessary for the use and/or feasible for the site, to reduce impervious surface and to support the historic village character with customized parking requirements. Based on that standard, staff is recommending 1.5 parking spaces for all 1 and 2 household dwellings on this lot, and this is reflected in the table below. The maximum can be reduced where the property is close to public transit. However, that's not applicable here. On-street parking is also not applicable. There's no on-street parking allowed on Williston Rd or Slate Barn Drive within 600 feet. Could be allowed with a shared parking analysis that would be provided at the discretionary permit. And for residential development, which is factored in the table below. So before I get into dimensions, I'm going to jump down to the parking table. Typically in this table, there's no maximum and therefore no minimum for 1 and 2 household dwellings. Staff is recommending to use the 1.5 parking spaces metric that's typically applied to multi-unit dwellings where 3 or more dwellings are proposed in the building.
Emily, 1.5, you said per dwelling. Could you define dwelling for us here?
1.5 parking spaces per dwelling. A dwelling is its own unit. So a house, an apartment, anything that contains its own housekeeping facilities, that is its own home or dwelling unit. So 1.5 spaces per dwelling is my recommendation, whether it's a single or a duplex unit here.
Okay.
Based on this analysis, 4 to 8 parking spaces would be required for the residential use. And based on a 2,000 square foot or 3,100 square foot office building, that's if the office consumes the entire building, it would be 3,100 square feet. Then 6 to 9 parking spaces would be required for the office. This would mean a total of 10 to 17 parking spaces if there's no sharing. And it's likely that an office use with daytime peaks and a residential uses with evening and weekend peaks can probably share some parking, but that would be determined by discussions tonight and finalized with a shared parking analysis that's submitted in the future. Bicycle parking, compliance is anticipated here where bicycle parking is required for the commercial use, and an end-of-trip facility is only required for the commercial use, presumably is existing in the office building because it was a converted dwelling, so it probably has a full bathroom with a shower facility. Jumping back to dimensional standards, the most significant challenge for this 5-unit development is the parking lot configuration. To meet these requirements, the applicant may need to consider options such as eliminating access drives to the garage for 1 or both carriage homes, eliminating the commercial office in phase 1, or reducing the total unit count. I'm running out of voice, so I'm not going to read this entire paragraph, but the long story short is that the parking is, as it's configured right now, is in the setback, and there's about 50 feet between the edge of the garage and the property line, which is not enough space to have a 2-way access aisle, 18-foot long parking spaces, and meet that 15-foot setback. So something's going to have to be reconfigured in order for all of those dimensional requirements to be met on this site. On-site infrastructure compliance is anticipated. The existing Lampman House is served by overhead utilities. Anything new that's connected would need to be underground. Municipal sewer compliance is anticipated, see the double DPW comments, as well as municipal water. I do note that the water lines shown on the site plan will need to be reconfigured to comply with the permitted easements, and water line would need to be located on the subject property. Maintenance compliance is anticipated. The discretionary permit must show snow storage and solid waste storage if applicable, based on the number of trash bins provided. Density, the subject parcel is a ½ acre, whereby density is not expressed as units per acre. And landscaping compliance is anticipated. They're proposing a 6-foot tall opaque fence around the required parking area, as well as around the 2 proposed carriage homes. At discretionary permit, there will need to be landscaping that complies with the recommendations drafted here. Additional plantings between and around some of the homes, and ensuring that the landscaping provided complies with the planting schedule. Street trees compliance is anticipated. There's 2 very old deciduous trees in the front yard. We'll need some information on those, their anticipated lifespan, and then a plan for reestablishing those trees if and when they need to be removed as hazard trees or if they come down. Watershed health, no wetlands or waterways are mapped on the parcel. The discretionary permit must specify the total cumulative land disturbance area, and it could be right on that quarter acre threshold. So less than a quarter acre, basically you just fill out a checklist attesting to meeting basic site disturbance standards during construction. More than a quarter acre and, less than a quarter acre, you're just supposed to, you're encouraged to take best practices. And then above a quarter acre, less than 2 acres, you're doing that simple checklist. There are some standards at discretionary permit that may need to be met if they're above a quarter acre and less than 2 acres, in terms of how the landscaping is used to treat stormwater on the site. Outdoor lighting is only applicable to the commercial use in the parking lot. And lastly, impact fees are assessed on a per unit basis at a time of administrative permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Now the site plan that we are looking at tonight was received on October 12th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the DRB has not had a lot of time to look over this yet.
So that site plan was provided by my request. They're not changing anything to the site. It's the same one you have in your packet. It just has the tree layers turned off,
Okay.
so you can better see and understand the parking and the setbacks.
Thank you. Before we go to the applicant, could you just walk us through the access of Lot 1 and Lot 2? Is that a shared access somehow, a single curb cut? What's going on there?
Yes. And I'm going to pull up the aerial imagery because I think that'll make it make more sense. Okay, so lot 2, lot 1, the subject parcel is highlighted here. And the shared driveway is within the flag lot. So the driveway comes off Williston Rd. It turns into the subject property, and it also continues straight back to serve the duplex. So the applicant only has an easement over the first segment for access.
That's helpful. Thank you for bringing that up. Matthew, could you please walk us through sort of like what you see as the flow of this development in terms of traffic, parking, open space, and if you'd like Emily to bring up any other pictures that would be helpful.
Yeah, so what do you want to talk about first, I guess, because there's a lot of items on here. So you said traffic first?
Let's start with just coming in, you're driving in. And show us again the parking spots and how you envision those parking spots serving each carriage home and the main office.
Yeah, well, if we can zoom out, I guess, a little bit and go farther back. So there's obviously the shared drive, but where it cuts into the big parking area currently, can we see the carriage house there possibly? So that's the shared area is there is in the front, obviously. Then it cuts into the parking lot. And then further back, the proposed parking was to have 4 parking spaces essentially right there. After reading some of the comments and talking with the engineer, we might have to reconfigure that. But there's also a parking spot. There's garages in both these carriage homes. So there's actually a parking spot that will be it's a single car garage in each carriage home.
Okay.
Further, regarding parking, there's actually 2 parking spots that will be under the garage there, the phase 2 part there, which Emily can kind of highlight right there. So there's two parking spots there. There's 4 along the front there, or I guess 3 technically, because 1 is ADA. And then there's actually another one still, if you come around the front there, that you can where there's still a drive, where the pavement was allowed. So you've got a total of 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, plus 4 is 12. Now we do realize that the parking layout there with the 4 that are closer to the boundary line doesn't currently meet the the setback requirements. And maybe, hey Jeff, do you want to speak at this point maybe about this?
Yeah, just to shed a little light on it. I mean, I think what Emily just highlighted there is a good synopsis of kind of what we were thinking about proposing as part of the full build out with all 3 phases. But I did want to highlight a couple things. One is, and I think the concerns with regards to the parking setback are as it relates to those 4 parking spaces. And I actually want to just clarify something maybe with the board and Emily on that. If you look at where those 4 parking spaces are proposed on the east side of the property, that area is currently where the existing parking spaces are. So the access off of Lot 2 and from Williston Rd, and then the entrance into this property is still the exact same now as it's proposed to be. But currently, under the existing conditions plans, as you pull into that parking lot, essentially it's kind of a typical double loaded parking area where there's the 3 parking spaces that exist now. Here's a good example or a picture of how it was originally designed. So there was 3 parking spaces on the south side and then 4 on the north side with appropriate screening and fencing. The intent obviously now with those 4 parking spaces on the north having to be reconfigured to allow for the access to the 2 carriage homes, our initial thought was to ultimately rotate that parking area, and maybe Emily could go back to the proposed plan now that you had marked up, is to rotate those 90 degrees and allow for that 2-lane access to the carriage homes between the 4 new parking spaces and the barn or garage is going to be converted. And one thing I did want to clarify is that we understand now that there's a 15-foot setback off property lines to parking areas. But if part of that parking area is existing parking, is any part of that parking grandfathered in or can be reused for parking as part of this development plan? And thanks, Emily. This is very helpful, obviously, to compare the existing and proposed conditions. Because if you're looking at the proposed conditions to the left, if you see the kind of the lighter shaded area, that area is the intended expansion of gravel parking to provide the access to the 2 carriage homes, as well as widen that out enough to have the 20 or 22 feet we needed width between the back of the parking spaces and the garage. But as you can see, what's not shaded there, where we're calling for those 4 parking areas, is where the existing gravel currently is constituted or sits. So even though we're showing it in the 15-foot setback, it's kind of already existing gravel and parking. And if we needed to eliminate that small wedge of gray on the very north end and shift those down a little to the south, or maybe reduce that parking area from 4 to 3, we could certainly do that, but we'd hate to lose that capacity of parking given how tight of an area it's going to be back here to begin with. So maybe just start with, if it's possible, to ask Emily or the board what the thoughts are on that.
Emily, would you like to respond about whether things are grandfathered in and what's?
Yeah, so the document on the left is the proposed conditions plan, and the document on the right is DP 2019 final plans. The darker area was the parking that they were proposing, and the lighter hatching around it is the snow storage area around the parking and between the landscaping and the screening fence. So the parking space on the far right, this parking space is within the 10-foot, it meets the 10-foot side yard setback. And what I discussed in the staff report, jump to the parking. The first 1.5 spaces, so here, like approximating where the garage is, this would be the first 1.5 spaces, can make use of the existing parking area 10 foot from the property line per DP 2019 final plans and WDB 41.5.5.1. However, solving the setback issue for 1 out of 4 spaces doesn't solve the parking problem. So they can make use of that existing parking area where it's shown on DP 20-19 within that 10-foot setback per 41.551, but it would only apply to that first space and a half, and then the rest of it would have to snake around and meet that 15-foot setback. Any existing gravel that extends beyond what is shown on the final plan is unpermitted and can't be reused. It's all based off of can't be reused in this approval. Anything that can be reused needs to be shown on an approved final plan.
That all makes sense, Emily. I appreciate the clarification. And then one other quick question I did have on the parking is, understanding that Matt is intending to have an internal parking space to each of the proposed carriage homes. Is the proposed gravel driveway access to those carriage homes, understanding it's only 1 car in width, is it possible, understanding it being kind of a tandem parking scenario, but is it possible to allocate a parking space to the parking area directly in front of the garage, if that's the only way to get in and out of the garage?
Good question. The bylaw doesn't explicitly talk about tandem parking. The DRB precedent is to not count tandem parking. So the garage and the space in front of it counts as 1 parking space. Even though theoretically someone could tandem park 2 cars, the precedent is that it only counts as 1 space.
Okay, thank you for that clarification as well. Yeah, so, I think big picture wise, we're not proposing any changes to the access to the property. We obviously have some homework to do with regards to, a parking sharing analysis, as well as where we're going to propose ultimately propose the parking areas. Having had this conversation with the board and Emily, I think we have a better understanding of where our options lie, and what restrictions and setbacks we have to comply with. I do think there are solutions to this situation, given the site layout and constraints and items we have, and understanding that there does appear to be some waiver opportunities with both the setbacks as well as the total number of parking. If we can state a solid case to the DRB at time of discretionary permit application.
Okay, thank you. Matt and Jeff, do you have any other questions for Emily or anything that you'd like to cover before we open this up for questions of the board to you?
Yeah, I think ultimately there's probably other spaces that are within the setbacks that things can be moved around regarding the parking to get the enough spots.
And I do just have a couple quick questions, and I'll try to make them brief. One was there was a mention in the staff report about staggered footprints. And just to clarify, is that the requirement for the frontage of the two new carriage homes to be staggered a little bit as the building footprints sit on the land? Can I get clarification on that?
Yes, so in one of the substandards of 41.8.3 telescoping development pattern, each building addition or mass is staggered from the footprint and roof line of the building mass it abuts. So the principle here is connected and disconnected, telescoping farmhouse pattern. Nothing is cookie cutter, so they would need to be staggered. The recommendation from the HDAC is that given the small lot, staggering 1 to 2 feet would be sufficient.
Okay. And then I think the only other really question I had was, and it relates to both the water service as well as the DPW comments with regards to water shutoffs. Understanding that ultimately we're looking at serving potentially 3 additional dwelling units at the rear of this property. And so a two-part question, is there a reason why we could not serve these 3 dwelling units with a single larger water service and then have individual shutoffs for the 3 units internal to the lot if there was an agreement or permission granted to DPW or the town to access those? It seems just redundant to run 3 or 4 new lines to the back of this off the main line when one could sufficiently be installed to serve the project. And then the second part of that question is I think there was a comment that water line or water lines, plural, depending on the answer to question 1, would need to be on property and could not be contained within that 25-foot easement on lot 2. And I'm just wondering if there's a reason why that water service or services couldn't be contained within the easement on lot 2.
So the second question, and then I'll defer the first question to Christine Doherty. I'm not an attorney. I'm certainly not your attorney, but my reading is that easement over lot 2 is just for access, not for utilities. So again, not an attorney. I don't know the true answer to that, but that would need to be something that the applicant would have to look into. And if they're proposing water or sewer service on an adjoining property, they need to show that they have the legal rights to do so. Christine, are you able to provide any comment on the first question?
Yes, thank you, Emily. Christine Doherty, Assistant Director of Public Works. So Jeff, with regards to the location of the curb stops, that falls back to our standards that those curb stops are to be within a public right of way. There's a proposal for, I'll leave it right there. It's supposed to be in a public right of way. I understand you're looking at a little bit more of a higher density development here, in which case we can talk offline about potential opportunities for putting a mainline trunk line up there. But upon an initial review and applying the standards as they apply today, the curb shutoff should be within a public right of way, which would be 2A.
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Route 2. Sorry.
Yeah, we can certainly follow up offline a little bit as far as what other options we potentially could look at, but I appreciate the feedback. And for what it's worth, Emily, that's all I had as far as follow-up questions right now. So I'll hand it back over to the board.
Thanks, Jeff. Board, any questions for the applicant or for staff?
I'm really interested in public comments
Yep,
at this point.
for sure. All right, if that's the case, then the board is good. And again, the applicant, anything else from you guys at this point? Okay. I know there's a lot of public interest in this. I think that's great, and we want to listen. We want to give the applicant a chance to listen. Are there any members of the public who would like to approach the board with questions, concerns, either online or in person? Yes?
So
Please.
they can come up to the table.
Okay, please come right up to the microphone here so that everyone, if you're comfortable with that, can hear. And if you could state your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Jude Domsky, and my husband Tim and I live at 7999 Williston Road. And I think we did submit a letter that clearly stated our position. Tim Ross, myself, and the Pintares all own the acre and quarter that borders that, which includes the driveway, and we're all unanimous in saying that we're not going to permit easement beyond just them accessing their driveway. So they wouldn't be able to put sewer or water over that. After we submitted the letter, the staff report came out, and there were just a few details that I wanted to bring to your attention, that the lot to the west of this property, there's two historic buildings on the lot and then two historic buildings adjacent, and this rain garden is sort of in the middle of four buildings in the historic district with wooden foundations. Abutting this rain garden is a driveway, and on the abutting property, a parking lot, and then these wooden structures that fit. On our property, we've experienced pretty significant flooding. We are in one building, two households, and the rain garden is 30 feet from our house. We have beyond that another half acre of a field, which completely gets flooded. There's two reasons. One is that, we have a perimeter drain that feeds into a sump pump, and when it froze, the groundwater just filled our, started coming into our basement. And we're concerned that the groundwater coming from this paved lot in front of us is going to flood our property. And then the leakage from the rain garden floods quite a significant area behind us. And again, we have the room, the field, the ground to absorb this. If this development experienced either their sump pump failing or a leak in their rain garden, what it would impact is the wooden foundations of the historic district. Obviously, most significantly, the ones that are right against the rain garden. I know there's different ways to approach rain gardens, but my research said that you should not plow snow into a rain garden because the road salts kill the vegetation that's meant to absorb the water. And then, of course, we're concerned about how that salinated rainwater would then affect the old growth maple grove that sits between Ridgeline Realty and our property. Tim and I bought the house in March of 2024. We're obviously aware that it was quite a contentious debate before we arrived, and we just know a little bit about that. But so it's not in my backyard, but I will say that grove of maples that he's proposing to build on or clear and build on do provide a pretty significant buffer between the cars that are idling at the stop sign, and it is in a direct line from that air pollution to the elementary school and sound pollution going to the bike path, and F-35 sound pollution coming down. So we're in a pretty high, and then, of course, if you cut some of those trees, you're going to have a clear cut to I-89 beyond Williston Rd. So our concern is obviously the sound pollution, the light pollution, and the air pollution that will come from cutting the trees on the lot, and the flooding of having these units kind of shoehorned with 10 feet to the property line, so all of that rainwater and snow water is coming onto our property, which is already flooded. I think we kind of laid out some of those issues in our letter, but again, the historic buildings on the west side weren't addressed, and the fence and landscaping on the east side of the property, you know, it's the thickest part of the tree line, so you wouldn't be able to get a straight wooden fence through there without cutting more trees. And then on the north side of their lot, those two buildings, the canal in between these two buildings that is just barely covers the easement of the sewer line, all of this water is falling into that space in between the buildings. I'm not sure that there's enough space for an excavator to get in, and should that excavator need to come from our property, it would require cutting down even more trees on our property. We're a little concerned, again, because of that little buffer between this development and our house, that the 50-foot trees that are 15 to 20 feet from our house would be compromised. Or I didn't mean to jump in there. But again, I think our points were pretty clear in the letter, but more about some of the other issues that could result from putting salted snow into a rain garden that looks like it's not 10 feet from a wooden structure, a driveway, a parking lot on the other side, and that the one-way driveway to the carriage houses, unless they're going to back one way all the way out into the driveway beyond, would be tempted to do a K-turn, either right next to the remaining open land next to the rain garden or over what looks to be like the sewer line. So we think there's quite a few environmental issues with this development.
So, Emily, I would love you to bring up that aerial and walk us through some of the points that was just made, because I'm not familiar enough with, I didn't follow a lot of what you said. And, you know, because I don't live there.
So where Jude was talking about historic foundations, the property to the west is 38 Slate Barn Drive, so the historic two-family structure, and then the Slate Barn of Slate Barn is the accessory structure to the rear. So where the applicant is proposing the stormwater treatment / rain garden area is where my cursor is located, to the north of that garage. So this is sort of the natural low point between the historic structures on the abutting property and the garage. The maple tree stand extends on the applicant's property and then onto the abutting neighbor's property and along both sides of the driveway. So some of the trees would be removed as part of the development where my cursor is located.
It would be the majority of the trees would be removed.
Yeah, the trees that wouldn't be removed would be obviously the ones on the neighboring property.
Yep. Okay, thank you. That was very helpful.
Thank you for that letter and for your testimony. There are certain things that the DRB can do and certain things we cannot do. And I want to thank you for coming to this at the pre-app process where we're early in this, and it may be a chance to work with the applicant, for you to work with the applicant to get some of these things done. Emily, could you please talk about stormwater, viewscapes, sound buffers, what the DRB can and cannot take into consideration at pre-app and discretionary permit?
Yeah, so the bylaw standards around sound, I'll start there, are typically when a new development is proposed, what sounds the development will generate, and in terms of more so an industrial use. So the sounds of residential occupants at a single family or a two-family home would not trigger the sound standards of Chapter 18. That's typically when an industrial use is going to have a lot of heavy equipment and machinery near residential uses. The bylaw is permissive of snow storage in landscaping and stormwater areas, provided that the species are relatively salt tolerant or tolerant of plows being pushed into them. So there are standards in our bylaw that allow snow storage to overlap with those areas. The standards in Chapter 3 and 29. In terms of what stormwater treatment is going to be provided at the site, our bylaw threshold where it's less than a quarter acre, best management practices are encouraged, and typically in regards to maintaining erosion control during construction. The standards for a quarter acre to 2 acres are the low impact erosion standards, and there are some provisions in the bylaw that would come into play into site planning that were excerpted in the staff report. So it remains to be seen. This lot is a half acre. There's 2 existing structures. It remains to be seen if they will be above or below that quarter acre threshold, and that would play into what stormwater information is provided in the future.
Thank you, Emily. Are there any other public comments, in person or online at this time? Anyone would like to come forward?
We do have a couple folks on Zoom. I recommend wrapping up in person if there are any before we go on Zoom.
Anyone else in person? You'll be able to ask questions if something comes up. Let's go to Zoom then.
All right, there's 2 folks. Liam, you're up next. I'm going to allow you to talk now. Liam, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Liam Murphy. I'm an attorney with MSK Attorneys. I'm appearing on behalf of Bill and Tracy Niquette, who are neighbors just to the east of this property. Unfortunately, they're literally on a plane right now and weren't able to join tonight's hearing. They did submit a letter today, and I would just like to summarize the issues that they have, and obviously I know the staff will look at the letter in detail. So Bill and Tracy are supportive of increased residential development in the village and in the town generally. And when this was first subdivided by the current applicant, who divided it into lots 1 and 2, they actually supported the subdivision, but with assurances of 2 things. One, that landscaping would be placed between the driveway and their property, and that the driveway would be graded in a manner so as to divert water away from their property. Unfortunately, the landscaping has died and has not been replaced, and the grading was not done in that manner, and the backs, their yards are being flooded from the existing road. So we believe that, the Niquettes believe that first, before giving any approval to this proposal, that the conditions of DP 20-19 should first be enforced, that the landscaping should be replaced and the driveway graded in a manner so it's not diverting water onto the adjacent property. But the water issue really is the biggest issue for them in general. You've heard a lot of testimony about the access driveways, the number of parking spaces. There's going to be a massive increase of impervious surfaces on this property. And I would note that if you look at the site plan you're looking at, that this rain garden is only designed for roof and snow storage. There is no plan proposed at all for all of the additional impervious surface that is being added to the property, including treatment of the existing driveway. So we would just ask the DRB and the staff to ensure that there is adequate storm water treatment, not only of the roofs and of the snow storage, but of all of the impervious surface, including the driveway to the rear lot and any new parking areas and driveways. Thank you. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Does the DRB have any questions for Liam?
Not for Liam, so for staff. Liam has raised some concerns drainage-wise that are outside of the boundaries of the parcel that we're looking at and considering. So what are we supposed to do as a DRB with that concern?
Unfortunately, I don't think there's, much, if anything, the DRB can do. So where I'm highlighting my cursor is where the driveway enters the subject property. So any driveway north or above that circled area is probably out of their easement area and was constructed to serve the duplex. So any water shedding issues for that portion of the driveway, the applicant would not be able to correct as part of the application, number one, because they don't have access to it via the access easement, and number two, their proposed development doesn't utilize that portion of the existing driveway. So that would be a concern between the abutting property owners, a private matter that would be beyond this scope of the DRB in reviewing this application.
Okay, thank you. And additional impervious driveways. When I'm looking at the drawing that we received dated October 12th that has that new gravel driveway access to the two proposed structures shaded in a darker gray. And that darker gray is the extent of the new impervious gravel driveways. Is that true?
That is my understanding, and I see that Jeff, the engineer, has his hand raised if he wants to add any clarifications.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Just to clarify two quick things is in reference to Mr. Murphy's comments is you're correct, board member, that the total proposed impervious related to this project are the two carriage homes, and then the small portion of access gravel drive to really access to those two or widen the parking area there. Understanding the parking may change in configuration a little bit based on the comments from tonight, but as it stands right now, that total new impervious area is roughly just about 3,000 square feet, which is, less than 1/10 of an acre. And then one other quick clarification, I believe Mr. Murphy mentioned that the current applicant was the one that subdivided these lots 1 and 2 that we're referring to tonight. And I don't believe that's accurate. I believe one of the owners of lot 2, the Pinteres, were the ones that originally subdivided these 2 properties and permitted the configuration and the driveway there. So I just want to clarify that as well.
Any other questions from the board at the moment?
May I comment again?
Yes, please.
So I do believe that the town has the authority to require compliance with the conditions of DP 2019. And I do believe that part of that approval was that there, of course, would be no storm water shed onto adjacent properties, and that the driveway would be graded onto onto this combined property. And I apologize, but I do believe Mr. Parisi was involved in that original subdivision. But the point being that the town does have the authority to require compliance with the conditions of the DPW 19, of which this was one of the 2 lots. So this lot itself was created by that approval. So I think that's our point. And then, of course, as there is increasing in parking as well as these driveways and new roofs, they really, the board really should make sure that all of the stormwater would be taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. The board will take that into consideration. Emily, could you touch on gutter systems in this district? Where are they supposed to feed into? Where is there a drainage ditch along the road there that, like?
So our bylaw does not have standards for gutters. And the stormwater thresholds are based on the total amount of site disturbance. So if it's less than a 1/4 acre, you're supposed to use your landscaping around the property. This is pre-application, so discretionary permit. They could show some grading and landscaping in order to achieve that stormwater standard. But it's not explicit that there shall be gutters, that everything shall be pitched a certain way in the bylaw. The second point I do want to make is clarifying the permit record. So it was DP 15-06 that created the subdivision where Alex Pinter was the applicant. And that took place and was completed before the applicant tonight purchased the property. So Blair Knowles and Matt Parisi purchased the property after that subdivision went through. It was DP 2019 that was the change of use where there was the condition about the fence and the landscape screening.
Matt, I'm not proposing this as a condition or anything tonight, but would you be willing to take into consideration things like gutters and grading on the
I think to where it's easily done and accessible, I think Jeff and I can look into that for sure.
And do you agree it would be in the best interest of you as the developer to do that?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of things involved when you're developing a property.
Sure.
And gutters are kind of one of those things that's usually like after the homeowner purchases it,
Sure.
They can install them. That's kind of usually the way that works. They're not usually provided with the home. So I think there's something we could look into there. A couple of things I want to touch on. I don't know if this would be a good time or if I should wait if there's any other questions.
Board? Maybe if you could just wait, let me just check with.
Yep.
Are there any other members of the public on Zoom who would like to address the board?
Yes, there is one more person on Zoom. Nathaniel Ogilvy. I'm pressing the allow to talk now. Go ahead. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. Nathaniel is unmuted, however, we still cannot hear you. Nathaniel, feel free to submit your comment in the chat and I can read it into the record.
Matt, I'd like to give you the opportunity for some closing comments
Sure.
from you while we wait for
Yeah.
Daniel
Yeah.
in the chat. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm on Zoom too. It looks from my computer like the chat is disabled.
Okay. Let me see if I can fix that. Thank you.
For what it's worth, I'm on Zoom as well, and the chat seems to be working fine for me. I can see it and reference it for what that's worth.
You can probably see it because you're a panelist, so I'm going to try promoting him to panelist and see if that fixes the issue. All right, there we go.
You guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right, cool. Yes, my chat was disabled, so I was trying to figure out a way to communicate that. But all right, cool. So Nathaniel Ogilvy, I'm at 38 Slate Barn Drive, which is to the west of the property. I did just want to echo all the many thoughts on the impervious surfaces. My property is about a foot or two lower than theirs, and currently, as it is, I've got a stone foundation that does need to be repointed often because there's water running into the basement. I think adding structures is going to not help that in the future. So, and the only other thing I'd like to mention that hasn't been brought up, but it feels like this is more focused at the two structures at the rear, but with there being an additional residence in that garage is like 3.5 feet from my property line, and that space is where folks will usually hang out or barbecue, etc. So you're adding a residence very close to where what I would consider the open space for my property, because the other spaces are so close to or basically visible to Route 2 and Slate Barn Drive. So I'm not super enthusiastic about the garage being turned into a condo, but so anyway, those are my two concerns: impervious surfaces, parking, and the garage structure being turned into a residence.
Thank you, Nathaniel, and thanks for bearing with us while we figured that out. Emily, is there anyone else waiting in the comments?
If anybody else on Zoom would like to speak, please use the raise hand button. There's a couple folks online, but they are not raising their hands.
Okay, at that point, we'll close the public comments, and Nat, if you'd like to get any follow-up comments in, please go ahead.
Sure. So I think to address, when we did the conversion to an office and an apartment, that was before the duplex in the back on Lot 2 was built. And we had no part in building the driveway out back there. So we had no input, no control or anything. So I think the driveway going back to lot 2 is beyond our essentially purview and right to do anything to. As far as some of the other concerns that Liam brought up, the fences are still in place. The trees we planted are still in place. I think we'd have to go look at it to see if any of them actually died or not. There's a lot of other comments brought up. None of these trees are old growth forest. Misnomer of a definition of what old growth forest is, but none of them are old growth forest. In fact, most of them are actually 100 years old or less. What you see in the front of a ridgeline building, those trees are 2 old sugar maples, but they're actually only like 75 to 100 years old. There's pictures, many historic pictures of the Lampman building from the past, obviously, since it's a historic building. So accurate photos that show from the 70s and 80s that most of these trees were actually only 20 or 30 years old at that point. And they've obviously since filled in. So I think that kind of addresses that issue. I know that Jeff did, we had all the trees mapped. Isn't that right, Jeff? To show which ones we actually had to touch and which ones we didn't have to touch. Was that right?
Yeah, correct, Matt. We knew that the clearing was a potential issue for the development and the project here. So as part of the site-specific survey we did here, we located every tree on this property or adjacent to it. I think that was more than 2 inches in caliper. And you know, Matt's, I think, is going to do his best to salvage as much of that as he can. And we're certainly doing our best to limit the not only disturbance and impact and cutting, but the required new impervious too, to still at the same time accommodate the goals of the project. So, you know, that was something we had showed on the proposed site plan, and which is, I think, the one that the board originally received. And at Emily's request, we did submit a supplemental proposed plan that had the trees turned off because we had so many trees located on the properties that it got a little tough to read. So we are cognizant of that. We're really only going to call for the removal of trees that are necessary to get these buildings in the driveway.
Yeah, that and the buildings they're going to be slab on grade buildings, so they're going to be a shallow frost wall foundation. They're not going to have full basements that are going to have you know, unable, you know, be pumping water out of them. The water table is really high in Williston. I knew when we built that fence there. I dug down, took lunch, and water filled the hole. So we're not doing basements in any of these homes, for what it's worth.
Okay. I'd like to just give one last chance for any questions for members of the public that are in person tonight. Are there any follow-ups?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing.
If you could please say, sorry.
Oh, come up to the microphone too, please.
Yeah, I just want to state one thing. As I look at the proposed site map here, there's a number of right-of-ways. There's one for the sewer, there's one for water, there's a need to cut down some trees. And again, it's all stated in the letter, but just wanted to make very clear that we will allow no disturbance of our property, no cutting of any trees. We will not allow right-of-way easement, anything beyond what currently exists. So just want to be really clear with that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to thank all the members of the public that contributed testimony today, and I'd like to thank the applicant. And with that, we will be closing this hearing. Am I missing something, Pete?
Nope.
Okay, we will be closing this hearing at 8:44 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Just going to give everyone that would like to leave now a chance to step out before we start the hearing for our final agenda item tonight, which is DP 25-10, DP 25-10 at 2707 Mountain View Road. This is the wrong address. We're actually 1411 Redmond Road. So it is DP 2510, but it will be 1411 Redmond Road. And we will open this hearing also at 8:44 p.m. Thank you. If you could please state your names and address.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sarah Reeves. I'm the Executive Director for Chittenden Solid Waste District. And I am Greg Dixon, civil engineer, Krebs and Lansing.
Thank you. Staff goes next.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Maroney. I'm the Senior Conservation Planner with Williston Planning. I'll be presenting our staff report review of the reconfigured plan for the CSWD Materials Recovery Facility. This is DP 2510, discretionary permit review, which began on August 26th and continues tonight, October 14th. This is the Chittenden Solid Waste District Materials Recovery Facility, represented by Greg Dixon of Krebs and Lansing Engineering. The CSWD facility is 68,750 square feet building footprint, approximately 4 acres coverage area, on a 38.5 acre vacant lot at 1411 Redmond Road in the Industrial Zoning District East. Proposed area of disturbance is approximately 7.5 acres. I'll note that that has shrunk about 0.4 to 0.5 acres from the previous plan. We'll be talking about what has changed. The property is currently undeveloped, is second growth forest with historic imagery demonstrating past evidence of farm fields, including the area where the building is now proposed. Access is via town roads, and this design, including the previous iteration and the reconfigured plan, has been reviewed by the Williston Conservation Commission. Staff recommended action tonight is to take testimony, close the hearing, deliberate, and approve this discretionary permit application with conditions of approval as drafted. Project history. This DP application was continued from August 26 to allow the applicant to complete a site reconfiguration as recommended by the Williston Conservation Commission following the habitat disturbance assessment by Arrowwood Environmental to ensure compliance with WDB 27.5, which are Williston's habitat protection bylaws. So before jumping into the plan, I want to briefly share some figures that show the major components that have been changed. And Greg, please, we'll have an opportunity to jump in and clarify anything if I miss anything here. So I'll start by presenting, this is figure 1 from the Habitat Disturbance Assessment Addendum, which we will discuss, that shows how the building footprint, the site plan has shifted in response to the HDA recommendation and the Williston Conservation Commission's recommendation. Yellow was the initial site plan footprint, and in red, this is the revised proposed clearing. It has shifted towards Redmond Road to the east and south from the site as recommended by the initial habitat disturbance assessment, which also puts it at a greater distance from the large Class 2 wetland identified at the north, and most importantly, creates space for the habitat corridor that was identified running north-south to the west of the proposed location. Taking a quick look at the site plan, noting that this project arrow north, so this drawing is configured with west at the top. The most important thing to note is this red line here, which was drawn before any reconfiguration or redesign of the project took place, with Greg Dixon reaching out to town staff as well as the habitat biologist at Arrowwood Environmental to determine a method of most effectively representing the habitat corridor so that site redesign could take place while prioritizing that recommendation to make space. And it was decided the best and most efficient way to do that was to create a 240-foot setback from the property line, which creates space for that 300-foot corridor, exceeding that distance in some cases, while at one pinch point reducing it to around 250 feet, which was determined by the habitat biologist to be well sufficient for maintaining that minimum habitat corridor distance. So from there, the site reconfiguration took place. I'll just orient briefly to a few things that were changed. The stormwater basins were split into smaller basins with a higher number. So there are 4 basins at approximately the corners, which are deeper for a smaller surface area, but the same capacity. The parking is now located at the south portion of the lot, which is shown on the left here. The rear of the building is what faces Redmond Rd, with traffic queuing. We'll discuss around around the south side here. And the glass aggregate storage area is now at the north, which is shown here on the right side of this image. All right. So the Williston Conservation Commission reviewed this reconfigured site plan October 1st with the applicant. Interdepartmental review. There's an additional Department of Public Works memo which was provided on September 26th. Fire Department determined that their previous memo submitted on August 12th was sufficient. Nothing had changed except for some things we will look at specifically. We'll mention them briefly. And there was no public comment received at this time. All right, I'm going to give a quick overview of the project elements through this table, which compares the recommendations which were presented at pre-app and what has happened since with regards to our review of compliance with this reconfigured plan and the applicant's response. Starting with WDB Chapter 35, which presents the Industrial Zoning District East bylaws. We found that to be in full compliance, while noting that the building height is still planned at 39.5 feet, which does exceed the 36-foot limit in the IZDE, but which is allowed through an exemption, which we'll review in a moment. The discretionary permit application was found to be in compliance or with compliance anticipated with all of the major sections listed below from the bylaw. That includes the access section. The driveway is in compliance with the alignment grade site distances, public work standards. Parking, some changes were made that we'll take a look at, most notably just identifying very clearly on the architectural plans where the long-term bicycle parking spaces will be in the end-of-trip facility. The plan complies with on-site infrastructure, with maintenance requirements, and compliance is anticipated with any potential hazard or nuisance components related to WDB 18, several of which were identified during pre-application, but have been addressed since then with this plan. Landscaping, parking lot landscaping complies. Additional detail has been provided for the outdoor lighting plan, which demonstrates it's in full compliance with WDB 24. Master sign plan is in compliance. No street trees were acquired. Chapter 27, conservation areas, and 29, watershed protections we'll address in just a moment. WDB 30 is not applicable. And the discretionary permit application, of course, must address the comments of the town departments. Here we're noting, most importantly, the Department of Public Works memos. There have now been 3 different memos throughout the course of this review from May 19th. Memos provided by Department of Public Works on August 11th, the most recent on September 26th. Several elements of those memos outline portions of the plans which should be revised for final plans, but which do not prevent the approval of a discretionary permit based on what has been presented. The applicant has provided response narratives throughout that process, which identify how compliance is met or providing additional information that was needed for several of these, many of these components. Discretionary permit must address the Conservation Commission recommendations from their pre-application memo. We've been through multiple rounds now of WCC review. The habitat disturbance assessment had identified some challenges with complying with the habitat protection bylaws. And through the habitat disturbance assessment addendum, which was requested by this board, we'll see that those have been found to be substantially revised in a way that brings this into compliance with those bylaws. Okay. So we're going to jump into the sections, starting with a quick refresher on the permit exemptions. CSWD is a regional solid waste management municipality. So their facility here is certified under 10 VSA Chapter 159, qualifies to be partially exempt from the specifications of our bylaws for the Industrial Zoning District East. In this case, that exemption is applied to the maximum height of the building, which would normally be limited to 36 feet. That's right here at building height for the Industrial Zoning District East, WDB 35. And because that height limit interferes with the intended functional use of this facility, that exemption may be permitted. And that was determined at pre-application. So the building height is proposed to be 39.5 feet. That was explained in the applicant's narrative letter. Complies with other dimensional standards, and there are no density requirements in the IZD, no minimum lot size. There are no outdoor sales proposed. There's one outdoor storage area which has been presented, of course, on the plans. That is the processed glass aggregate area, which is contained by a concrete block wall and buffered adequately by forest cover. WDB 13 is our section on access, connectivity, and traffic structures, or traffic studies. This is one area that's changed substantially from the previous configuration. So I'll jump back to the site plans in just a moment so you can see that more clearly, but the most important as it relates to access and traffic change is that the vehicle queuing linear distance, which was a concern or question from the DRB previously, has been increased from 300 feet to 750 feet so that it should be able to adequately meet even the busiest predicted traffic off the street. And so you can see that on the left side of the site plan, turning left off Redmond Rd. And this is the south side of the building, so looping around the south side before reaching the scale, and trucks accessing the facility on this west side in this large area before exiting the way that they came. Now, DPW, in one of their memos, requires the removal of a proposed stabilized accessway from the plans where the municipal water line enters the site. It's a relatively small change that can be accommodated effectively at final plans, but I'll point that out. Here, if you can follow the cursor, this is where the municipal water line that's being extended will meet the site and enter through this utility corridor. This small bump out here was proposed to be a stabilized pull-off for accessing the water meter, and that is the component that was referred to by that DPW comment to be removed. All right, off-street parking and loading. This complies as proposed. The big change here was simply in terms of, not necessarily a big change, but just in terms of providing additional information with regards to long-term bicycle storage and end-of-trip facilities. The architectural plans have been presented. As you can see on the screen here, this is an additional memo that was provided by the architect that just demonstrates exactly where those will be. 4 wall-mounted bike racks, which are proposed inside the facility, contained with a chain link fence for secure storage. And on the office level, there are 2 shower facilities, a locker room with private changing facilities. There is short-term bicycle parking provided on the exterior for inverted U-racks, and the parking spaces are in compliance and adequate for what is required. So I won't review this full table unless requested by the DRB. All right, on-site infrastructure is in compliance. Type and density of industrial development does not necessitate sidewalk construction or easement. There are no circulation concerns. Underground power and communication lines are shown. municipal water. It's been determined through cooperation with Department of Public Works that municipal water line can be extended to this site, so compliance is anticipated. However, DPW will not sign off on the final plans until the state water main construction permit has been approved. In terms of maintenance, a couple areas here which during pre-application some more information was requested that has been provided. There is minimal litter expected in the grounds of this site. All the site management practices to be employed include daily monitoring via walkabouts, according to the most recent narrative letter. Trash compactor on site will be regularly emptied and serviced by a waste hauler, and all of the recycling processing steps take place inside the building. Now, special consideration was given in the narrative letter with regards to providing more information around this litter question related to the processed glass aggregate storage area. In that area, also we'll see there are some questions raised about dust as well in there, which we'll take a look at. Among the other points, the narrative letter clarified that these PGA, or processed glass aggregate particles, are typically not large enough to become, or are typically large enough not to become airborne. They're sand-sized particles. So with regards to blowing litter, that won't be an issue related to the PGA storage area. And although it's possible that some of that PGA particles could be moved by stormwater runoff, the grading of the site has been designed such that any particles that would be moved by stormwater runoff will flow into a pre-treatment forebay for one of the stormwater ponds. And I'll show that on the plans. Just briefly, this is the PGA storage area, and the grading drains directly into this forebay here and the storm basin beyond. Snow storage complies as proposed. There's adequate storage alongside the building and perimeter swales. Solid waste complies as proposed. There is an enclosed trash compactor located adjacent to the building on the east side. The proposed plan shows screening for that solid waste container and adequate access. And that brings us to WDB 18, which is compatibility with potential hazards and nuisances. So there are a number of areas here for which more information has been provided through the most recent narrative letter. That includes dust after construction. And this is where the PGA storage area comes up again. The narrative has already significantly or sufficiently addressed during construction dust control. So the only question with regards to dust was post-construction, could there be dust on site as it relates to this PGA storage area? And this simply goes back to the fact that the processed glass aggregate is a substance that is similar in grain size to sand. So those particles have been described as typically not large enough to become airborne, and they're not small enough on the other hand, to behave like glass dust. So glass dust would be the concern here. In addition to that, in the event that dust would be generated by dumping or transporting that, the site plans demonstrate concrete waste block storage bays, and surrounding tree cover would prevent any potential or significant potential for any dust that could be generated from blowing across public ways as it pertains to the language of the bylaw. A mechanical equipment plan sheet was provided on September 12th that shows the location of exhaust fan stacks and vents on the rooftop. It's noted that these, are exhausted vertically. There's limited chance of directly conveying any odors, gases, hot air, smoke, steam, or vapor, none of which is expected in any large quantities, but there's limited chance just from the design of that being directed onto any public ways. And all mechanical is proposed to be located on the roof. There are no significant odors expected. And the last area that we bolded here, because it was a question after pre-app and with the first round of discretionary permit, was hazardous materials. So the applicant has shared an email exchange, which was PDF'd and provided with the materials with communication between CSWD staff and the fire department discussing the hazardous materials that are expected on site. They've created a list of the materials that are expected, and the fire department identified that those materials were either identical to or highly similar to the materials that exist for the current MRF site, and they did not request any additional detail with regards to additional work for a hazardous material plan beyond what already exists for the current MRF site. There was one small question that was noted in that email exchange, which was what compressed gas, just to be identified, and it was explained in the narrative letter that the materials may still change as some specifics are determined, and so that communication is expected to continue with the fire department. And in the narrative letters, it was written, once materials will be on site, quantified, and locations finalized, we will work with the fire department as needed to determine any additional steps. So we've placed a condition that we'll see at the end, 16D, just to, as a condition of approval, to maintain that communication continues if and when anything changes. All right, that brings us down to landscaping, which complies as proposed. The only element here that needed some additional information was related to parking lot landscaping and providing some additional information on soil volume for one of the planted trees. It's noted that the soil volume present on the parking lot island should be sufficient to maintain the proposed planting material, a sugar maple, for a certain period of time, but maybe less than is optimal for the full maximum lifespan of a sugar maple. We felt that it did comply with meeting the minimum requirements of the bylaw, though a smaller tree could be substituted at final plans if desired, but we felt that there was compliance based on the soil volume provided. Street trees are not proposed or nor required. And that brings us to conservation areas. So I've already provided a little bit of information regarding the changes that were made. There were significant changes made. The site plan was fully reconfigured in response to the previous Williston Conservation Commission recommendation to maintain that corridor west of the site. And we believe that CSWD and Krebs and Lansing have found a solution that significantly addresses those primary concerns. That finding was supported by the HDA addendum, which was provided to you in your materials. That 3-page analysis that was provided by Aaron Worthley of Arrowwood Environmental, the habitat biologist who conducted the initial habitat disturbance assessment. And Arrowwood found, or concluded rather, that the redesign project is consistent with Arrowwood's primary recommendation for that habitat corridor and better complies with the intent of the habitat and corridor protections in Williston's bylaw. It also identified numerous secondary benefits where this reconfigured plan was really put together in a way that paid attention to more than just that primary recommendation. It addressed exterior lighting concerns. It increased protection of a high-quality wetland by moving the construction site a farther distance. It added perimeter screening and avoided a minor wetland impact. The HDA did include a couple of recommendations to further strengthen or mitigate habitat impacts. That included strengthening the plan for perimeter screening planting, and implementing a formal invasive species management plan with a monitoring component. And I'll just note that earlier today, CSWD submitted some more resources that includes a specific invasive species management plan for this site, and includes a revised planting specification to accommodate these changes. And that was all after the October 1st meeting with the Williston Conservation Commission in an attempt to meet the conditions of approval that have been placed in this staff report according to Williston Conservation Commission. A couple of diagrams to give you a sense of how this played out. On the left, you'll see this is a diagram of the original initial site plan as it overlaps with Williston's mapped travel corridors and wildlife core habitat, those significant wildlife habitat areas. We'll note that the mapping of those travel corridors is not necessarily meant to be absolute, and that's the reason that habitat disturbance assessments are required on these sites to go look at the ground and determine what the conditions are really pointing to with what is most significant. But you'll see that in that initial configuration, there was concern that it was significantly blocking wildlife movement on the site. In the revised plans, which you'll see in the middle, the scale is, I'll just note real quick, the scale is different on these figures. So the plan is not actually larger here, it's just slightly more zoomed in. In fact, the clearing is a little bit less in the reconfigured plans, but the site has been moved closer to the road and farther south so that there's actually more space for both east-west movement and most significantly, as already discussed, the northwest or the north-south movement on the west side of the component or of the property. All right, watershed health, there's really no concerns here. Runoff and erosion control plans have been provided. Wetland delineations have been conducted. There are no impacts to wetlands of any kind. Outdoor lighting complies as proposed. Additional details provided that demonstrates the overall exterior lighting plan that both satisfies the lighting requirements of WB 24 while also clarifying one of the initial concerns of the habitat disturbance assessment that was conducted that had raised questions about light pollution extending into the habitat. So in addition to the perimeter planting, which will help to visually screen the remaining wildlife habitat, the lighting plan makes clear that the design of the exterior lighting as well as the hours of operation will also facilitate minimal impact from lighting on habitat. Master sign plans are approved administratively, so that's something that can be compliance is anticipated from that, but it does not need to be reviewed here tonight. And CSWD is exempted from transportation impact fees. All right, so that's the deep dive into the sections. And that brings us to simply the findings of facts, which are laid out here, which are still substantially the same, and our conclusions of law, which I will not go through at this time. And the conditions of approval, most of which have been reduced to our boilerplate conditions of approval. A couple things to note, of course, the Williston Public Works memo needs to be met with a written response for all of the different elements. Many of those already have a written response to the narrative letter. There are a few additional items that will need to be addressed at final plans to check off all of the boxes related to the Williston Public Works memo. The Conservation Commission conditions of approval, there are two of them that were recommended for the DRB to approve with this discretionary permit review. And those are really to enforce require further compliance with the HDA addendum, the requirements to increase the design of the perimeter planting by making the providing multiple plants depth for that planting, and using multiple species along that planting. And both of those have been reflected in the additional material submitted earlier today, which can be incorporated into final plans, and then a requirement for the formal invasive species monitoring and management plan. Some information that was also submitted today, but which staff have not had a chance to review yet. The only other thing that we'll draw your attention to at this time with regards to the conditions of approval is just noting this was previously noted for final plans to address the following items of WDB 18. In the printed staff report, instead of following items, this said outstanding items. That was a holdover from the previous staff report, so I wanted to note that has been changed. These requirements A, B, and C to explain noise, dust, and odor, specify mechanical equipment, and make sure that mechanical equipment is fully screened. We believe those have been met. Those are relics from the previous iteration of this document, but we do sometimes leave those in to just show that there is a record of those conditions. So we have left them in for now, although we do believe that those have been met. And the final one here is the language related to the hazardous materials management plan. 16D, provide the fire department with an updated hazardous materials management plan if and or when locations are finalized or material list changes. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you, David. We'll turn it back over to the applicant. First, I would just like to thank you for the absolutely substantial changes that have been made and the work that I'm sure went into it. It was all done very quickly, and it's clear to me, at least as one member of the DRB, that CSWD really cares about preserving that wildlife corridor. So again, I thank you for that. And with that, do you have any questions or concerns about the conditions that you've heard tonight?
No, we don't have any questions or concern. Well, no concerns. I don't know if you have any questions. But I also wanted to take a moment and thank town staff, particularly David and Emily, for their very helpful and prompt responses to and feedback on the material that we sent to them. It was extremely helpful to us to be able to meet these deadlines, and it was important to us to get to this meeting. So thank you both very, very much.
Thank you for that acknowledgement, and thank you both. With that, I think we'll open it up to the DRB with any questions. Anybody? Nope.
I just want to echo thanks for the work. I think the end product here is much improved.
With that, we'll open it up to the public. Is there any public in person that would like to comment or questions? Anyone online? Or sorry, did you? No? Anyone online?
There's one attendee online. They spoke at the prior meeting, or the prior agenda item, and no raised hands.
All right. Well, with that, I think we will close this hearing at 9:18 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
The DRB will enter a deliberative session once everyone is left in the closed. Welcome back to the Williston Development Review Board meeting of October 14th, 2025. We are out of deliberative session at 9:57 p.m. Is there a motion for DP 26-04?
Yes, as authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, Pete Kelly, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of town staff and the advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of October 14th, 2025, accept the findings of fact in conclusions of law for DP 26-04 and approve this discretionary permit subject to the conditions of approval above. This approval authorizes the applicant to file final plans, obtain approval of these plans from staff, and then seek an administrative permit for the proposed development, which must proceed in strict conformance with the plans on which this approval is based.
Thank you, Pete. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Pete Kelly.
Yay?
Brian Curtis.
Yay.
Matt Fraser.
Yay.
And the chair is a yay. We have a quorum, motion carries. Is there a motion for DP 26-03?
As authorized by the WDB 6.6.3, I, Matthew Fraser, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of October 14th, 2025, accept the findings of fact, inclusion of law for DP 26-03, and approve this discretionary permit subject to the conditions of approval above. This approval authorizes the applicant to file final plans, obtain approval of these plans from staff, and then seek an administrative permit for the proposed development, which must proceed in strict conformance with the plans on which this approval is based.
Thank you, Matt. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Pete. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Pete Kelly.
Yay?
Brian Curtis.
Yay.
Matt Fraser.
Yay.
And the chair is a yay. Motion passes. Motion carries. We are at DP 26-2. Is there a motion for DP 26-2?
Yes, as authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, Brian Curtis, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of October 14th, 2025, accept the recommendations for DP 26-02, and authorize this application to move forward to the growth management and/or discretionary permit review, while adding a sixth recommendation. Staff shall obtain a legal opinion prior to the first discretionary permit hearing about nonconformities, particularly for the adaptive reuse of the existing garage within the side yard setback.
Thank you, Brian. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Pete. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Pete Kelly.
Yay?
Brian Curtis.
Yay.
Matt Fraser.
Yay.
And the chair is a yay. Motion carries. Is there a motion for DP 25-10?
Yes, as authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, Pete Kelly, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearings of August 26, 2025 and October 14th, 2025, accept the findings of fact and conclusions of law for DP 25-10 and approve this discretionary permit subject to the conditions of approval above.
Thank you, Pete. Is there a second?
A second.
Brian, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Pete Kelly.
Yay?
Brian Curtis.
Yay.
Matt Fraser.
Yay.
And the chair is a yay. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve approve the minutes of September 23rd, 2025.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you, Pete. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Brian. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a vote. Pete Kelly.
Yay.
Brian Curtis.
Yay.
Matt Fraser.
Yay.
And the chair is yay. Motion carries. Minutes pass. Is there a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Pete. Second?
I second.
Thank you, Brian. Meeting is adjourned at 10:04 PM on October 14th.